Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you once again for joining us on a Sunday morning as we continue to bring you the best in responsible fatherhood conversation with experts, insight, provocative thought, opinions, and research, and you name it. I'm trying to bring it all to you so that we can really round out this conversation. I've been also kind of thinking about bringing in different subject matters as I listen to dads and see emails and texts and DMs that come to me about, you should talk about this, you should talk about that. So I'm trying to respond to those as well. And in doing that, bringing in great people that I've been involved with for really 20, 30 years, some of them 10 years, some of them more recent. And this individual is no different in that space. He is Chris Broussard. He is an internationally known sports analyst and commentator for the Fox Sports 1 television network and Fox Sports Radio. Today, he serves as the daily co-host of First Things First on FS1, and can also be seen regularly on FS1's Undisputed, The Herd, and Lock It In. He also serves as the co-host along with Rob Parker of one of the country's most popular daily national radio shows, The Odd Couple. Before joining Fox Sports in the fall of 2016, Chris worked for 12 years as an NBA analyst and reporter at ESPN, ESPN The Magazine, and ESPN.com. Chris wrote for the New York Times from 1998 to 2004 and graduated from Oberlin College. He is also the founder and president of the national Christian men's organization called the K.I.N.G movement. K.I.N.G stands for knowledge, inspiration, and nurture through God, and seeks to help boys and men reach their God-given potential in every realm of their life. He's happily married for more than 25 years. He's got twin daughters, and he lives with his wife, Dr. Crystal Broussard, in New Jersey. Hey, sir, how you doing?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You know, I was thinking about when we met, and I was like, man, I said the first time I saw him was at this event in Queens, and we were getting an award for something. I can't remember, and you had to leave. Earl, I think you had to leave, and somehow you and I was talking, and you asked me to scoop up your award, and you had to leave. I don't know if you remember that.
Well, I remember it was, and didn't I give a keynote speech?
Yes.
International Men's Day, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You had to leave, and we were talking, and you said, "Could you scoop it up for me?" And I was like, "Sure." Then I was thinking about it, I was like, man, that was Chris Broussard. He told me to scoop up his award. It just was something that was like resonating in my head. And I was kind of thinking that you and I have now, that was over 10 years ago. And so
yeah.
That's a long, long time to be in the same space in this work. And so how is your family? Let's start there. I'm always new and good with your family.
Yeah, man, everything is going great. You mentioned the things I'm doing with my career. My wife is a medical doctor. She's a gastroenterologist, and she's doing well. She actually was featured in a book within the past year and a half. It came out within the past year. It was, I think it's called I Am Doctor, but it's about Black female doctors.
Okay.
And it is, they feature like 40 Black female doctors, photos and their story and all that. So, so she's doing really well. My daughters, I have twin daughters that are 24 years old now. And they both graduated from college, graduated in 2020 during the pandemic. And one now who graduated from Michigan, she works at BET in content coordination.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one, who graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, she's now doing research in the psychology department at Yale. So they're both doing well. They're out of the house. But the good news is they're close enough where we see them every 2 or 3 weeks. So it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
My parents are actually living with me now
Mm-hmm.
because of some health challenges, but they're good. So I'm blessed, man, for sure.
Thank you. So, and as we kind of ease into our conversation about fatherhood and then the work that you're doing with King, last time I think you and I were texting each other and you were telling me about specifically your dad. And I was having a conversation with someone and I said, we don't talk enough about men as caretakers, particularly of their parents. Like, we don't talk about this. And what made me think about that is I was at this meeting in LA, and there was a bunch of women organizations there and folks who were doing, similar work around women's rights and things. And they asked me to come in and kind of talk about fathers. And one of the young ladies said, my mom has dementia. And she goes, and it's really, something that we really have to deal with because women are really impacted, by our parents in need of aftercare. And I said, I just want to interject here. I said, my household, my mother-in-law had dementia, and my wife and I took care of her for 2 years in our house. And I can assure you that it didn't just impact my wife. It impacted the entire house. It impacted myself. It impacted my son. It impacted our family. It impacted everywhere. I said, if we're going to have this conversation about being caretakers, we got to talk about it in the family context. Like, moms are not the only ones who care for their children. And ever since then, for some odd reason, men that are in my circle, we've been having conversations about them being caretakers. And so that's something at some point I want to lift up, particularly in the faith space, about how we cultivate our men, particularly Black men, to be ready, to be caretakers, and to also know that there are support mechanisms around them to help them with that. And part of that is talking about it, because most of those men never said that to me until I brought it up. And then they said, oh yeah, that's me. Right. And so as you're walking through, this now, have you given much thought to what life would be like for your dad in this space if he wasn't in your life and you weren't in his?
You mean as he is now in his health challenges?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but I think there's a very good chance that my father might not be alive. In that he has cancer, and my mom has dementia, and she's had it now for probably about 5 years or so. And he's been essentially taking care of her when they live together, obviously, as husband and wife. And so the daily challenges of dealing with her fell on him, of course. And she has her long-term memory, thankfully. So she can still remember everybody and events and have an intelligent conversation, but her short-term memory is gone. And so dealing with her is at times frustrating and mentally challenging and straining, just because she asks a lot of the same questions over and over again. And, over time that can get exasperating. And so he was dealing with that by himself. And a year ago, we found out he had cancer, a little over a year ago. And my feeling was, him having stage 4 cancer, if he has the physical strain of that, plus the mental and emotional strain of dealing with my mother by himself, that could be too much for him. And so for me, it was a no-brainer to bring him and my mom into our house. It's been a pleasure. I've often thought in the past about how years ago it was much more common for, as people grew older, they were probably more likely to be around their children and grandchildren, and maybe even great grandchildren for a time, because people weren't as, going all over the country and moving and following jobs and things like that as much as they are today. And so I've thought, like, man, it would really be nice if, as you grow older, if you are around your family. Mm-hmm. And so now they were in Ohio, Cleveland. I live in New Jersey. My brother lives in Detroit. And so they were by themselves. And so bringing them here has really, I can see my father is stronger, not only physically, but in other ways. My mother is in better spirits because she has more interaction with me and my wife and my daughters when they come over, and we're taking them out, we're doing things. And so it's been a blessing. It's not just we got to watch them, it's our responsibility. It's actually been good. They're still independent enough where my wife and I can go out for dinner or movie or whatever it might be when we want to. My dad, I take the train into New York City to go to work. He drives me in, or at least to the train every day, every morning, picks me up when I land, arrives back from New York. And so that's giving him a sense of purpose as well. There's other things they can do around the house. And so yeah, it's been good, man. And my thing is, look, all that they did for me, I wouldn't be where I'm at. There's no doubt, no matter how smart I think I might be or whatever, there's no way I'd be where I'm at if it weren't for sacrifices they made and the things they did for me when I was younger. And so it's not a burden or a hassle at all. It's something I should do.
Mm-hmm. I'm
glad to do.
Yeah, it's just kind of giving me this other element of this work as it relates to fatherlessness, that when you are absent in the life of your child, that's not the only life that you're absent in, and that your value as a man is even more valuable, being not only present for your children, but being present for your family, right? Not only for your family, but for yourself. Like, that's just this extended thing that we don't talk enough about when we talk to fathers about being responsible. We kind of only narrowly talk to them about the responsibility that they have for their children, but we don't really have a lot of dialogue about being in position to be available for your family, particularly your own parents. I had the pleasure of interviewing Malik Yoba about a month or so ago, and he's writing a book now, and he asked me to write the foreword for his book. And so as I wrote the foreword for his book, it inspired me to kind of think about this whole notion of what I describe as echoes of your father. And so what brought him to writing his book is his manager said to him one day, knowing his relationship with his father, said, "Do you know that you often quote your dad? Do you realize that when you're talking, you quote your dad a lot?" And he said, "Nah, I never even paid it any attention." And then he started paying attention to how many times his father comes out of him, either in action or in voice throughout the day. And so I was telling him that inspired me to start looking at writing this book called Echoes of Your Father, and how the presence of your father echoes in your life in areas that you don't think about. When you think about your own dad, where are the spaces in your relationship that you can put a finger on and say that this is an area of my life that he is truly inspired?
Wow. I mean, he's inspired every area, to be honest, but I would say on a very superficial level, I call my wife Bae. "Hey, Bae, what you doing? but just that's what I call her. And I never decided, that's what I want to nickname my wife, but that's what my father called my mother, or calls her still. And so it just, I don't even know when I started calling her Bae, but I do, or I used to really always have a toothpick in my mouth because I grew up seeing my dad with a toothpick in his mouth after dinner and stuff. So certainly things like that. I think a respect for authority, and taking care of your family responsibilities. My father was very authoritative. He was definitely the head of the household. And he taught me to respect his authority. And that transfers to authority outside of the house. And so, that is something he certainly impacted me with. And I think a lot of things you just pick up from osmosis, just from being around your dad. He didn't always sit me down and teach me, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. These are your responsibilities. That's a good thing. It's something that is good to do, but he just didn't really do that with me very often. But I just picked things up from him, from living with him and from interacting with him. He coached me in every sport I played, baseball, basketball, and football. He helped me with my homework. Like I was an English major. Obviously, before I became full-time broadcasting, I was a writer. I started my career as a writer. And my dad used to help me with my writing, with diagramming sentences. I don't know if the young people even do that anymore, but we used to diagram sentences in school. And, just he'd look over my essays and just help me with my grammar and things like that. Academically, there was no doubt I was going to be a good student because I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to play sports, which I did, and I played all throughout my youth and high school and even into college, I had to take care of the grades first. Most young people are not going to study or read if they're not made to, if they don't have to. Now, there are some young geniuses out there. There are a handful of young kids that'll just motivate themselves and do it themselves. But most of us, particularly boys, and particularly in today's society where there are so many distractions, where if nobody is watching me or nobody tells me or makes me do my homework or study for my test, I'm probably more likely to get on social media and be texting or posting or seeing what's out there or on my phone talking with friends or watching a movie or watching a sporting event there's so many distractions. It's unbelievable. And so I believe parents need to, you have to study. It's not your choice. If you're going to live in this house where you get fed, where you get clothed, where you get taken care of, then you're going to live by our rules. Mm-hmm. And the rules are you have to study and do your best in school. Because in American society, the way you get ahead is education. Barring that you are just some super 0.1 of 1% super athlete or super musician or singer or whatever. That's an area he impacted me. That's, the approach I took with my daughters. And obviously they did very well academically. And so there's so many ways that he just impacted everything really in my life. He impacted every area of my life.
And all of those things are what I describe as echoes. They're just echoes. They're just him echoing in your life and those echoes showing up in your life in some way. And I think that those echoes happen whether you have a negative relationship or a positive relationship. Those echoes that come back at you come back because they have either been cultivated, intentionally made and given to you, or they don't exist. And so the hole in your heart that yearns for your father reverberates emptiness, and that stuff echoes back into your life. That's what I mean by echoes of your father. Since I've known you, you've had a heart for men, and you've always expressed specifically a heart for men, and more specifically Black men. What has been the driver for you really paying attention in your life? And I'm gonna call it your ministry. We're gonna talk about King in a minute. Before Chris, like, what is it in you that really makes you yearn for the betterment of particularly men, but more specifically Black men?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and this would be another echo from my father, was that my dad was very pro-Black. And he wasn't pro-Black in terms of knowing a lot of Black or African history, or being so necessarily militant. But, you know, he did march in some civil rights marches. He and my mom went to an HBCU, Xavier University in New Orleans. That's where they met. Obviously, Xavier was somewhat a part of our life growing up because they were alumni. We used to meet in Cincinnati when I was a young boy living in Cincinnati. They would have alumni events all the time. And so all the other families, their kids, we were good friends with them. All my aunts, so I have two aunts on both sides, both of my parents' sides, and I have two uncles, and they all went to Xavier. And my grandparents, my mother's parents, went to Southern University, another HBCU in Baton Rouge. And my father's parents didn't go to college, but he was very pro-Black. I knew all of that stuff, so that probably seeped into me as well. But just in terms of, you know, really being proud to be Black, telling me stories about him growing up, even in the Army. He's light-skinned like me, except he lost his hair when he was, you know, he went bald at a fairly young age in his early 20s. And so he probably be, you know, one way people identify me as African-American is my hair, you know? And so he would be in the Army around some white guys and get in fights because they start talking about, you know, Blacks in derogatory terms or saying the N-word, not knowing he was Black. So he talked about that. And, you know, just in my household, as I'm sure many African-American households, we always rooted for the team with the Black quarterback or the Black coach, or, you know, I lived in Indianapolis, Indiana, because we did move around quite a bit. When Larry Bird and Magic Johnson met in that historic 1979 NCAA championship game. So I'm in Indiana where Larry Bird played for Indiana State, and me and my family were all rooting for Michigan State because of Magic Johnson and, you know, and Greg Kelser and all those guys. So just that was constant. Music, Black music, my dad singing and dancing and things like that. Brothers, you know, there's no Black family that I know of that some of the people don't use the N-word, you know, but so we obviously heard that, but for the most part, it was brothers, you know, everybody was a brother, you know, Black men, it was brothers, you know, how many brothers they got or who, you know, like, so all of that really just, like you said, that was an echo of my family and my father. And so that certainly created in me a very much a pride in being Black, which unfortunately, and to be honest, disappoints me, in that I do think a significant number of Black people don't have that. I think a lot of our people have internalized racial, have internalized white supremacy. And have internalized like a racial self-hatred. They may not even feel it individually. They might have self-esteem individually, but as a whole, just feeling, we got a lot of negative feelings about being Black, unfortunately. It's somewhat understandable when you look at our history, but it's certainly something we have to get rid of, because we'll never be as great as we can be and what God created us to be, as long as we feel like we're inferior or second rate or something like that. So he always instilled in me that pride in being Black. I never felt an inferiority complex to whites or any other race. As we moved around, at times we lived in mostly white neighborhoods. And my brother and I were the only Black kids in my Catholic high school or Catholic school when I graduated from junior high in 8th grade. And I was the valedictorian of the class, the only Black kid there. And I was the valedictorian. I always made the honor roll in high school every quarter, So that in and of itself was dispelling some stereotypes that whites may have had about African Americans. But so I think that was certainly one of the things that led to me being pro-Black myself. And then as far as men, I think, and you'll be able to relate to this, I never heard the word that I remember hearing the word mentor until I was like in college.
Right.
Because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and Black men, and this is shocking to a lot of younger Black people who think, either growing up now, they think Black fathers just generally aren't there, right? Because now it's 75% roughly of Black children growing up without, their father. He may be in their life, but in the home. And then some think it's a remnant of slavery, because the Black family was broken up purposely. And obviously that was true. But we did resurrect the Black family, and from 1880, when we got out of slavery in the 1860s, from 1880 to 1960, 80% of Black children were born into a home with a father, And so when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I mean, almost all of the Black families we knew, and I'm talking about, and I grew up middle class, but I'm talking about dozens of Black families, not a couple. Dozens. The father was there. I mentioned the Xavier alumni that, we would be a part of. All of them were couples, father and mother and children. That was in Cincinnati. I lived in a majority, predominantly Black neighborhood, College Hill. And I'm trying to think of all our friends. Every in the block, it was mostly Black. Everybody's father was there. There was one young guy that was living with his grandparents, but outside of that, everybody's fathers were there, and they were active. I mean, we on the street playing football, and the dads are, throwing the football. We playing baseball, or we're playing pickle, and they throwing it to us in the backyard, or going to play when my dad would play ball on Saturday mornings with a bunch of brothers. And, we go with them, and their dads, I mean, their boys were there, and we hanging out with them. Like, it was just common. It was like seeing grass in your front yard, It would think like dads, Black dads, not Black dads. It was all I knew, in Indianapolis. Same thing, men that picked me up and took me and their children to school.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Harkness actually was his name. He was on that Loyola Chicago team that won the NCAA championship. I want to say 1961.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the year. They were the first team to start 4 brothers, and then the next year, I think it was the next year, Texas Western started 5, and won the championship. So coaches, my coaches in baseball, Little League, this is when brothers, African Americans were more into baseball. Coaches were Black.
Right.
It just, and so when I got to college, and I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, and my father was a Kappa, and he started through the frat mentoring. They had a mentoring program, and he mentored a young man. And that was really my first kind of interaction with the concept of mentoring, because again, growing up, we had their fathers. So it wasn't, I didn't need a mentor. Perhaps in a specific, career path or something. But as far as raising me up and teaching me how to be a man, it was my dad. And so as I got older, though, college, more cats in college didn't have their dads that I had. Although it was still, so like my basketball team was 80% Black. I think most of the dudes had their dads, in their homes. But I still, overall, you're meeting more that didn't. And then, this is when it's really beginning. Like I said, 1960, it was 80% of Black fathers in the household. By 1980, it was down to 60%. So that's still a majority. I graduated high school in 86, college in 90. So this is when, when I'm coming out of school, this is when it's really, the Black family, in terms of a nuclear family, is really beginning to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that was the whole, the whole gist of the Moynihan report. Really began speaking to how particularly the Black family was breaking down as a result of what was happening to Black men. And we
crack epidemic, mass incarceration, the war on drugs, all of that was destroying the Black family. And, so that was, I was beginning to see, that there weren't, a lot of dudes were growing up without men in their lives. And so the things I took for granted as a kid, I was like, man, these are important. If we're going to really, be strong as a people, we have to strengthen our men. And so that's a big part of why I have such a desire to help men, be the men that God created them to be.
So let's transition that conversation into the fact that you and I, are men of God. We are Christian men. And you created the K.I.N.G movement, which stands for knowledge, inspiration, and nurture through God. Talk a little bit about what inspired you to create K.I.N.G, and then talk to me a little bit about the purpose and what you're trying to accomplish with K.I.N.G.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that were the impetus for K.I.N.G. Really, when I became a Christian, it was my senior year in college. I grew up going to church, Catholic church and all that, but didn't really come into a personal relationship with God or a saving faith in Jesus Christ until I was a senior in college. I was actually 21 years old. And so when I got out of school and I'm working, I didn't really know a lot of young brothers that were my age that I could relate to that were really trying to follow God. I knew dudes that went to church, but as far as really trying to gear your lifestyle in a Christ-like manner, I didn't know a lot. And I longed for that, because I think all of us as men, we need male bonding, whether it's, a gang, a lodge, a fraternity, all of those are forms of male bonding. I think females need female bonding. And even sports. I mean, some of my fondest memories from team sports were on the bus, in the locker room, joking around with cats on the field or, during practice or whatever. And that male bonding. And so I long for that in a Christian context. And so, dudes I could relate to in terms of hip hop, in terms of culture, in terms of, sports or whatever, but who also would encourage me in my walk with the Lord. And we're going to encourage me to stay strong and follow Christ rather than to go out and do something that was against his will. And so I also, as I longed for that, as I began to meet I was in Cleveland, Ohio at the time, covering high school sports. And as I began to meet more and more brothers that were my age, that were Christians, I saw that a lot of them, their walks were like a roller coaster. They might be strong for 6 months, then out for 3 months, then strong for a year, then out for a year. And depending on, because I was meeting all types of guys, and depending on what your backstory was or your testimony, one of those down periods. I mean, I knew dudes that had become Christians, gotten saved in prison, had been drug dealers or whatever. And when they went through one of those down periods, they were getting involved in the type of stuff that would land them back in jail, And so I said, I felt like one of the reasons, there were others, but one of the reasons that dudes struggled in staying strong, just solid, was that they didn't have that brotherhood. They didn't have men they could relate to, a group of men that were fighting the same battle, fighting the good fight of faith, right? And that they could relate to in other ways. Mm-hmm. So when you went and hung out, you were hanging out with your old boys who weren't saved. And I'm not against, obviously we all have friends who aren't Christians, but if that's all you have, mm-hmm. and every time you hang out, every time you watch the game, every time you go here or there, or you're constantly around guys that aren't saved and Christians and doing things that, we're not trying to do as men of God, that can either make you miserable or it can lead you to, fall. And that's what was happening. And so I said, you know what, if we created a brotherhood where guys had a group that they could hang with that would encourage them in the Lord. And a lot of times not just having a Bible study, not going to church, but watching the game. Going to kick it, hang out, but dudes that are gonna, the conversation and everything is gonna be more in line with your beliefs and principles and morals. I felt like if we could create something like that, then that would help a lot of men stay strong. And so those are things that led me to want to start something like the King movement. And I started something on a local level when I was in Cleveland. And then that was when I was covering high school sports. And then when I began, and we also did ministry too. We had dudes that rapped. We went to the projects. We were evangelizing. We went to prisons. I went to a juvenile detention center every week for like 3 years straight and ministered to the young brothers. They just send me in the quad, and I'm in there with about 40, 50 cats and just talking to them about the Lord and how he can change their life and all that. And the other brothers from the group would join me and stuff. And then when I got promoted to covering the NBA, and then I got married around the same time, I didn't have time to do any of that type of ministry. And so that group kind of fell apart. And when I eventually moved to New Jersey, started working at the New York Times, and my career was starting to blossom. And I just didn't have the time really to do that type of men's ministry. But I still had that desire to do it. It's like Jeremiah said, it was like fire shut up in my bones. So over time, the Lord showed me ways I could do it. and how to get K.I.N.G going. I met some brothers that started sharing it with them, and they were interested. And so we started it roughly 10 years ago. Now we have chapters throughout the country, about 20 chapters throughout the country. We have a national men's conference every year. This will be our 8th one in March of 2023. It's in Philadelphia. We've done Atlanta. We've done Memphis. We've done Charlotte. We've been in Ohio. And we've done events at Morehouse College, Florida Memorial University, HBCU in Miami. So we've done a lot of different things and built up a lot of brothers. We have hundreds of members now. And so, again, in keeping with the notion of trying to build up and strengthen the Black community and really raise our quality of life in the Black community, we feel like building up men into being the men God's created us to be, being the husbands, the fathers, the leaders He's created us to be, is absolutely imperative. Mm-hmm. And so so that's what we're doing. I mean, I'm honestly, Ken, like, obviously there are other ways, things we need to be doing politically and academically and all these other ways. But if we don't strengthen the Black family, mm-hmm. if we don't strengthen Black men, mm-hmm. and we don't begin having married families, couples and families again, we're fooling ourselves if we think we're going to really progress, because mm-hmm. we're not. Because as you know, boys need, and daughters, boys and girls, not just boys and girls need their fathers and they need their mothers.
Absolutely.
That's biological, that's historical, and it's religious. And throughout every society in human history, that's been the case.
Yeah, one of the things that I love, about the whole notion of the K.I.N.G movement and watching you from its infancy and watching and seeing where it's going is that brotherhood, right? That dudes just want to be around other dudes that are like-minded. And they don't all have to think the same. They don't all have to believe the same. They don't all have to be engaged the same. But as long as they can find a safe haven in the mix of other men that allows them to be their authentic selves, right? This is a great thing. One of the things that, I don't know, a couple of months now ago, so we're beginning to lose some of our more historical legacy pastors, Black pastors in particular. T.D. Jakes, just not too long ago, is now transitioning the Potter's House to Sarah Jakes. He's beginning to sunset out of that position to do other things in the ministry. We just lost, not too long ago, Dr. Calvin Butts from Abyssinian Baptist Church in New York. I believe Creflo is trying to figure out how to ease out and bring his son into the space. Dr. Frederick K. Price, many people remember him from Crenshaw, on Sunday morning. His son is beginning to take over for him. And so a lot of that historical manhood that was a part of the church from that traditional space is beginning to diminish. And we're looking for those younger generational voices that's going to carry these young men of faith, through. In K.I.N.G, have you paid attention to the generational aspects of the men that's coming into K.I.N.G and whether or not they're older, more traditional, they're Generation Z, they're millennials, like have their thoughts about Christianity and faith differed from what our parents thought about faith?
Well, I think that what we're facing is this may be, this next generation will probably be the first generation of African Americans that's not majority churched, right? When you and I grew up, most people went to church. Mm-hmm. And even if they might not have been saved or really living for the Lord. They might have been out doing all types of stuff, but they had somebody from their youth, a grandma, a mother, a father, an aunt, somebody was dragging them to church, telling them about Jesus, right?
Right.
And that was great. That was important, because even if a lot of young men went the wrong way or got wayward, it was the prayers of that mother or grandmother or aunt or somebody that maybe kept them alive. Maybe those prayers got them in the jail rather than the grave. You know what I mean? Like, and then that gave them time. Eventually they came around or something like that. But I don't think with this generation, I don't think as many, just keeping it real, we're kind of following in the ways of secular white society. And so as we get more money, more education, we're just kind of leaving, in my opinion, all society certainly is moving away from God. European society, which America is largely based on, is even further away than we are. And so a lot of our people, in the name of progress or whatever, they're leaving God as well. We're not quite as far gone, I don't think, as mainstream society by any stretch, but I also think we're not standing up for God the way we should be either. Because when we do get in the public space, even as we may be strong believers, we tend to leave the principles and morals of our faith behind to fit in or whatever. And so I think that's a mistake. I think actually us, standing up for God and representing God would not only be good for society, but it will be better for us as a people, because I think that would help society become more godly, and treat us like we deserve to be treated and accept us as we deserve to be accepted. So I think that's a difference. I also think that now, look, there's always, we're talking, you and I are Christians. There's always for, the last 100 or so years or more, been this kind of myth or notion that Christianity is the white man's religion, and it would show itself in the Nation of Islam or in, the Moorish Science Temple, or, now it's more like somewhat the Black Hebrews, Kemetic science. So you have those challenges, which are easy to dismiss when you really understand the Black presence of Black people in the Bible, his Christianity in Africa from the earliest times onward. When you understand all that and know the history, it's not hard to dismiss some of these false notions that keep a lot of Black men from the gospel. But I think the main thing is that, like I said, this younger generation is not as churched as our generations and the older ones. And we also find too that a lot of our younger men, and it's good that we have men of different generations, because they need the younger men, a lot of them, they're following the Lord, they want to get married, but they may have grown up in a situation where they didn't see a marriage.
Right.
So they need to be taught about being a father, being a husband, and even just experiences. Like, a lot of the times I think people that didn't grow up with a father and a mother in the home, sometimes they may have, I felt this way about my wife at times earlier in our marriage. Her father and mother got divorced when she was like 3 years old. So she never lived with a man and wife together. And I feel like she had an idealized view of marriage. So anytime you had an argument or a disagreement or a down period or whatever, it was like, do we still love each other? Or does he love me? Or, are we getting divorced and things like that? Whereas me growing up, seeing a married couple, my parents now have been married for 57 years. Seeing them have arguments, and disagreements and things like that taught me that's a part of marriage. When you have an argument, don't mean you don't love each other. Don't mean you get divorced or it's just a part of marriage. Like I grew up with my brother and we fought a lot. Didn't mean we didn't love each other and have each other's back. It was just, that's how it was and how it is a lot of times. And so that was even raising my daughters when they got in arguments. I mean, I wouldn't just sit there and let them argue. I'd stop it and have them talk it out. But I knew that that's not a big deal. That's what siblings do sometimes. So I think that having the older generation need to teach the younger generation how to be husbands and fathers and just talk to them about some of the experiences of marriage. We shouldn't just assume, which I think we can a lot of times in the church, oh, he's saved, she's saved, they're going to be all right. You still have to teach them practical things, just like because I'm saved, you saved, don't mean I'm necessarily qualified for this job. I still need to develop the skills to work this type of job. And we need to be taught the practical things and skills and understandings to have a successful marriage.
Right. So the 8th annual King Summit, Let Us Make Man, takes place March 9th through the 11th in Philadelphia. Why should men want to be there, and what will they get out of the experience?
Man, Ken, this is going to be an awesome summit. I think it's going to be our best one yet. I think we'll have the highest turnout. We usually have several hundred men. I think we'll get over 1,000, if not more than that. But we're going to have, the theme of it is Let Us Make Man. Because again, in this day and age, a lot of it can be confusing growing up today. I mean, I think in the most pristine situations, as you work your way through puberty and all that, it can be a confusing time for men. But nowadays, when you're getting all types of messages from society about manhood and things like this, it can be incredibly confusing. So we feel like we need to talk about biblical manhood and what God created men to be like and be, and how we can get there. And so that's why we called it Let Us Make Man. We're going to have great speakers. We got Pastor Eric Mason, who's going to speak about it's for all men. King and our summits and everything are for all men. But we do deal unashamedly with issues that are directly related to the Black community, because our experience here historically and even today is different from any other group in the country.
Absolutely.
And so one of those things is many of our Black men are on a search for identity in terms of history, in terms of race and things like that. Not just what's it like to be a man, what's it like to be a Black man? What's it mean to be a Black man? And so Pastor Eric Mason in Philadelphia, Epiphany Fellowship, he's going to address that. Pastor, it's at Enon Tabernacle, which is the biggest Baptist. It's either the biggest Black Baptist church in Philadelphia or the biggest Baptist church, period, in Philadelphia. But it's a huge congregation. Reverend Dr. Alan Waller, he's going to speak about men and boys. I'm going to speak about a new image for our men. We've been given an image of being boy, like America has wanted to make Black men boys, keep us in a state of perpetual adolescence so that we would never rise up and challenge the oppression that we've faced, or even in this day and age, be quote unquote competition in the workplace or in society. And so that's why even years ago, you might have been a doctor, you might have been a college graduate, you might have been a respected man in the church, but you were referred to by white society as boy. you know, and you couldn't look a white man in the eye. All of that was to make us feel inferior and like we're boys and not men. And we do have some arrested development in our community where we have 40 and 50-year-old cats that really don't almost act like 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. It's the same mentality. And so we need to come out of that image that was given to us by those who were against us, who are enemies, and accept the image that God has given us. And I'll even do this through talking about Black men in the Bible and what they were like. And those are the images we need to build on and follow, rather than this image that white America, racist white America gave us and that many of us still walk in. We're going to have Jason Avant, who was a former NFL wide receiver, speak at our basketball tournament. We have a citywide basketball tournament. We're going to have Brian Dawkins, the Hall of Fame defensive back for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to speak. We're going to have workshops. We don't just give messages, but we also have workshops. We're going to address one on urban apologetics, where we will address things like the notion that all African Americans are descendants of the biblical Hebrews. Is that true or false or whatever? We'll address that. We'll address the myth, the erroneous myth that Christianity is the white man's religion. We will have workshops on finances, how to handle your finances and improve in that area, sex and sexuality, career development, being a father, how to be a father, practical ways on how to be a father and a husband, finding your purpose in life. Like all of these things we'll address. We'll have fun. Like I said, basketball, we'll have praise and worship, prayer. It's just a great time together. And like I said earlier, as I was talking about the King movement in general, it's just awesome to be around hundreds and again, maybe thousands of Black men who are first and foremost seeking the Lord and serving the Lord, but walking in, positivity. And I kind of hate to put it that way, but I've had so many men tell me that this wasn't my experience growing up, but I've had so many brothers tell me they had never been in an environment with so many Black men where that were all searching, for the positive path, that were all encouraging you to do the right thing and living in that. Whereas a lot of times when we gather, obviously sports or a party, but a lot of times we gather, we just chasing women, or we just, doing something else, getting drunk, they were like, man, this is incredibly empowering and inspiring to be around this many brothers who are like encouraging you to be faithful to your wife, who are encouraging you to, how to raise your children and the right thing, the positive thing, encouraging you not to, smoke the weed, and get drunk. And I mean, so yeah, man. So it's, the Bible says, don't forsake the fellowship of other believers. Part of that is because God knew as we're in environments that aren't seeking to serve God and around people that aren't necessarily in that lane, we need each other. Just like Black people being minorities in this country and society, we need to come together sometimes and just, man, it's great to be around some brothers and sisters, because we have similar experiences and all that. Same thing with Christians and Christian men. And so that's kind of what we'll even have hip hop, man. We're going to have some rappers there and all that stuff. So it's going to be awesome, man. It really is.
Nice. So how do people register for the summit?
You can register at K.I.N.G Movement. Well, let me see. Our website is kingmovement.com. But so you may be able to register on there, but you can definitely register at K.I.N.G Summit KingSummit.org. Let me make sure. Just give me 1 second. But yeah, here it is.
Yeah, I'll make sure
King
that
Summit, KingSummit.org. March 9th, which is a Thursday, that's when the basketball tournament starts. Through Saturday, March 11th, we'll stay Sunday and go to church March 12th at Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church. But yeah, brothers can register at KingSummit.org. There'll be transportation from the hotel to the church. We do have a hotel, a Summit hotel, if you will. So yeah, man, you can go register now, KingSummit.org. And you, Ken, and other brothers are going to work with teenage boys, and teach them how to be brothers, fathers, and men. Brotherhood, fatherhood, manhood. And so I know, and you know better than me, but it feels like this fatherhood space. When I graduated from college and 20 years ago, even, it seemed like it was so important to everybody. We gotta, strengthen fathers and get fathers back in the homes. And now it feels to me like that emphasis is not there anymore.
No, it's not.
Like it used to be. Yeah. And that's disappointing, because again, where are we going? Like, where are we going without strong fathers? And even if you don't, need fathers in the home, like some pushes are assuming men are not going to raise their children, and so it's just, we got to band together and really get this thing clicking. Mostly for, in our case, Black men, but it's 50% of children in America, period, now are born without fathers in the home.
Yeah. So that's a whole nother podcast. Right. Talking about the state of responsible fatherhood now, because I'm in that mix each and every day. And part of it is, that it's expanding in terms of people who are getting involved in responsible fatherhood. So it's not just fatherhood people anymore. Now is Head Start. Now it's early Head Start. Now it's SAMHSA. Now it's reentry. Now it's housing. Now it's, TANF. Everybody.
That sounds like that could be good. Is that good?
It is good. It is good. But the challenge is the soldiers that we need to be able to go in those spaces, articulate what the issue is, drive policy, train individuals to help them kind of understand what this work is, the essentialness of that. There's not enough of us out there that do that on that level, right? And so there's a lot of guys who are out there, doing fatherhood stuff in their garage and in their basement, and they're getting into conferences, and they're talking about, like, I cringe every time I step into a fatherhood workshop with someone that I haven't seen and heard before, because you just never know what's going to come out of their mouths. And so that's a challenge. And part of it is that there's no infrastructure to the industry itself. Like, it has not become part of the social work context. And until things become, until the industry becomes credentialized, right, where people have to go through social work school to do certain things in the space. They have to be credentialized by credentializing agencies that make sure and ensure, that individuals are doing X, Y, and Z, and that there's at least some educational level or experience level that allows people to kind of talk about this space. Right now, there's no guardrails around any of that. And anybody who is a father can get on a Facebook page or an Instagram page and say, I'm a fatherhood advocate. And because people just don't know, about the industry, they follow them. And the next thing you know, you got all kinds of information out there. So that's why I'm still deep in it, and I'm not moving, until I'm trying to scale and expand and do more and get in those spaces. And we're doing a great job at doing it, but it's not enough of me out there to continue to move this work. But thank you so much, bro. There were so many other things I wanted to talk to you about. We're at our 55 minutes. I got to bring you back because there's several. I want to talk about the Black men in the Bible thing solely at some point. I really want to talk about, the power of the Black male voice in sports, and what's that doing to our community and our children, and how we're articulating that in the space. Talk about the historical context of people like Bill Russell and Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali and Arthur Ashe and Lou Alcindor, and talk about what they meant to the culture back then and how that has either translated or not translated to the younger African-American males out there, and how a lot of conversation now is getting twisted up in a whole bunch of other different things. And it's because folks aren't articulating their argument in a way that allows them to construct logical conversations. Right. That everything gets twisted up and the argument becomes about everything other than the conversation. That's what happens. That's what's happening right now. Yep. And so, I want to bring you on and have some more conversations about those things. And I will be there in March. I'll have my podcast stuff with me. So I might have to set up a table and have a couple of folks come through and just kind of talk about some subject matter so we could pull up some content and keep that stuff moving. Thank you, brother. I love you. And ain't nothing you can do about it. I love that you guys moved to 3, but I hate that you guys moved to 3 because I don't. You ain't my in the morning. You my coffee in the morning, and now you going at 3:00. I'm moving boys back and forth, and I'm doing life at 3:00.
It is, it's been a great move overall. Especially, for me, I get to sleep in the morning, which is great. But I have heard from so many people, even including a lot of people in the league around the NBA, because, they're up early and they checking us out to start their day. But at 3:00, people are in the midst of their day. Right. So I get it. But still, I'd rather be at 3 because I can get some sleep. So, all right, brother, strong in the Lord, man. I'll see you in March.
Absolutely. Take care. God bless.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.